Lieutenant Adrian Cole could still taste copper in his mouth as he knelt beside the wounded Zenthar commander. The alien's blue-tinged blood seeped between his fingers, staining the white and red of his combat medic gear. Around him, the remains of the Helios Prime outpost smoldered, the acrid smell of plasma discharge hanging in the air. "Hold still," Adrian muttered, more for his own benefit than the commander's. The Zenthar's translator warbled a series of clicks and whistles, its universal translation matrix struggling to process the pain in the alien's voice. Adrian assessed the damage. The commander's cenophage artery had been severed, and without immediate intervention, death was certain. The problem was, Adrian had no proper medical equipment. His medkit had been depleted during the earlier firefight, when he'd used the last of his synthetic clotting agent on 3 of his own squad members. In the distance, the sounds of battle continued. The Zenthar forces were pushing forward, and Adrian knew he had minutes at most before they overran his position. The logical choice was to retreat, to leave the enemy commander to die. But that wasn't who Adrian Cole was. "I can work with this," he muttered, glancing around the maintenance room where he'd dragged the wounded alien. His eyes fell on a roll of metallic duct tape and a section of hydraulic tubing discarded by the maintenance drones. The Zenthar commander's 4 eyes widened as Adrian reached for these items. "This is going to hurt," Adrian said, "but it'll keep you alive." With practiced precision that belied the unconventional nature of his tools, Adrian fashioned a bypass from the hydraulic tubing. He cleaned it, as best he could, with a sanitizing solution from his nearly empty medkit. Then prepared the commander for the improvised surgery. 20 meters away, a squad of Zenthar soldiers cautiously advanced through the corridor. Their biosensors had detected their commander's life signs, but also the presence of a human. They moved with purpose, weapons ready, until they rounded the corner. What they saw stopped them cold. A human, hands covered in blue Zenthar blood, holding what appeared to be an industrial tool against their commander's chest cavity. The human looked up, his face spattered with blood, both his own red and their commander's blue. The first Zenthar fired in panic, the shot going wide. The second was preparing to fire when the commander raised a weak hand. "Stand down," the commander managed through the translator. The soldiers hesitated, chittering nervously amongst themselves. But it was too late for rational thought. One of them activated his emergency beacon, broadcasting a panicked message. "Human medic performing unknown procedure. Commander compromised. Tactical retreat advised." Adrian didn't understand the alien language, but he recognized fear when he saw it. He returned his attention to his patient, sealing the makeshift vascular bypass with the duct tape, creating a temporary shunt that would keep the commander alive until proper medical care could be provided. By the time Adrian finished, the Zenthar soldiers had vanished, leaving only their commander behind. In their haste to retreat, they'd even dropped several weapons. Adrian wiped sweat from his brow, inadvertently adding another streak of blood to his face. "There," he said, sitting back on his heels. "That should hold until your people can get you to a proper medical facility." The commander's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture Adrian had come to recognize as confusion. "Why?" the translator crackled. Adrian shrugged. "I'm a medic, that's what I do." What Adrian didn't know, couldn't know, was that his simple act of battlefield mercy had just changed the course of the war. Within hours, the story of the human medic who had repaired a severed cenophage artery with maintenance equipment spread through the Zenthar ranks like wildfire. By the next day, Directive 37D would be issued to all Zenthar forces. Immediate withdrawal was mandated upon confirmation of a human combat medic engaged in medical activities. The directive wasn't born from gratitude. It was born from terror. The Nebula 9 mining complex was supposed to be a simple sweep operation. Intelligence had indicated minimal resistance, perhaps a token Draconid force guarding the abandoned facility. What Lieutenant Adrian Cole and his unit found instead was an entrenched battalion with heavy weapons. 3 hours into the firefight, Adrian had set up a makeshift aid station in what had once been the complex's mess hall. He'd treated 17 wounded soldiers so far, 5 of them critically injured. His medkit was running dangerously low on supplies. "Lieutenant!" Private Reyes called from the entrance. "We've got more incoming!" Adrian wiped his bloody hands on a maintenance rag that had once been white. "How many?" "4. Rodriguez took a bad hit to the chest. Thorne's lost a lot of blood." Adrian nodded grimly. "Bring them in." As Reyes left, Adrian took inventory of his remaining supplies. 2 packets of synthetic blood, 1 autosuture, half a canister of broad-spectrum antibiotics, and various bandages. Not enough. He glanced around the mess hall, looking for anything that might serve as a medical resource. His eyes settled on an industrial maintenance cabinet. Breaking it open, he found cleaning supplies, lubricants, and a canister of compressed biosealant used for temporary repairs to the environmental system. "I can work with this," he murmured. When the wounded arrived, Adrian was ready. Rodriguez had a punctured lung from shrapnel. Under normal circumstances, Adrian would use a pneumoseal patch. Instead, he repurposed a section of filtration membrane from the kitchen equipment, sterilizing it with industrial solvent before applying it with the biosealant. For Thorne, who had suffered an arterial bleed in her leg, Adrian fashioned a tourniquet from a section of maintenance cloth and used the biosealant spray as a temporary coagulant. As he worked, Adrian didn't notice the small reconnaissance drone hovering near one of the broken windows. A Draconid observer unit had been monitoring the human position, and now they were watching with growing horror as the human medic performed what they could only describe as reality-bending medical witchcraft. The drone's footage was transmitted back to the Draconid command center, where it caused immediate consternation. "What am I seeing?" Commander Xel demanded, his scales rippling with agitation. "The human appears to be using industrial sealant as a medical coagulant," the technical officer replied, his voice hushed with disbelief. "And that's maintenance cloth being used as a tourniquet." Is that an air filtration membrane he's putting inside that soldier's chest cavity?" "Yes, Commander." Xel's inner eyelids flickered rapidly, a sign of extreme stress among the Draconid. "And it's working?" The technical officer zoomed in on the feed. The wounded human named Rodriguez was now sitting up, breathing with effort but clearly alive. "It appears so, Commander." "Cut the feed," Xel ordered. After a moment's hesitation, he added, "Activate panic mode for all forward units. If any unit identifies a human with medical insignia and blood on their hands, they are to retreat immediately." "Sir, what about the mining complex? High Command expects—" "I don't care what High Command expects," Xel snapped. "I won't sacrifice my soldiers to whatever that is." He gestured toward the now blank screen. "That's not medicine. That's probability manipulation." While this conversation was taking place, Adrian continued working. As he finished stabilizing the last of the wounded, a deafening explosion rocked the complex. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling. "What was that?" Adrian called out. Reyes peered through a shattered window. "Sir, you're not going to believe this. The Draconids are retreating. All of them. They're just running." Adrian frowned in confusion. They'd been outgunned and outmanned. By all tactical assessments, the Draconids should have overrun their position within the hour. "Any idea why?" he asked, applying a final strip of improvised bandage to Private Jensen's arm. Reyes shook his head. "No, sir. Wait." He squinted through the window. "One of their officers is looking this way with magnifiers. He just saw you and now he's running too." Adrian looked down at himself. His uniform was covered in blood, both red human blood and the greenish-black blood of the Draconid soldier he'd treated earlier. The maintenance cloth he'd been using as a rag hung from his belt, equally stained. He had no way of knowing that the sight of him, a human medic with blood-stained hands and improvised medical tools, had just triggered a full-scale panic among the Draconid forces. By the next day, rumors were spreading through both the Zenthar and Draconid ranks. Stories of a human who could save the dying with nothing more than the contents of a maintenance closet. A medic who could defy the laws of biology with tape and tubing. The whispers grew, distorted, and evolved into something approaching religious terror. And in the highest echelons of the Galactic Medical Association, an emergency meeting was being called. The Grand Medical Chamber of the Third Galactic Council was a pristine environment, its white walls and gleaming surfaces meticulously sterilized by automated systems. It was the embodiment of the Council's approach to medicine, controlled, precise, and absolutely by the book. Today, however, the chamber was in chaos. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Shirala, the Zenthar representative, was saying, her translator barely keeping up with her agitated clicks and whistles. "These techniques violate every standard medical protocol established in the last 3 centuries. "And yet," countered Dr. Morales, the human representative, "the survival rates speak for themselves. Lieutenant Cole has saved hundreds of lives, including many of your own people. Dr. Girala." The chamber erupted in overlapping arguments, each species translator trying to outcompete the others, creating a cacophony of synthetic voices. At the center of the circular table, High Medical Adjudicator Tavesh raised a hand for silence. As a Valerian, a species known for their dispassionate logic, Tavesh had been chosen to lead the Galactic Medical Association precisely because of his ability to remain neutral in interspecies disputes. "The facts, as presented, are these," Tavesh said, once the chamber had quieted. "Lieutenant Adrian Cole, a human combat medic, has been documented using non-standard and improvised techniques in battlefield situations. These techniques, while unorthodox, have resulted in survival rates significantly above the galactic average for comparable trauma situations." He gestured to a holographic display showing Adrian's recent operations in the Nebula 9 incident. "What we are here to decide," Tavesh continued, "is whether these techniques constitute a violation of the galactic medical protocols, specifically Section 47B regarding authorized treatment methodologies, and whether human medics should be restricted from serving in combat roles." Dr. Zirala's appendages waved in agitation. "The issue is not merely one of protocols. It's about predictability and control. How can we maintain battlefield medical standards if humans are jury-rigging solutions from whatever scrap they find lying around? It creates chaos." "Perhaps," Dr. Morales suggested mildly. "That chaos is precisely what makes it effective. The enemy doesn't know what to expect, so they retreat rather than face the unknown." "Are you suggesting," Dr. Graxel, the Draconid representative, interjected, "that this human is deliberately weaponizing medical uncertainty?" Dr. Morales smiled thinly. "I'm suggesting that in war, perception can be as powerful as reality. If the enemy believes they're facing something they don't understand, their natural response is to retreat and reassess." High Adjudicator. Tivesh's brow furrowed slightly, the only outward sign of his concern. "This borders on psychological warfare. Dr. Morales, the Galactic Conventions are quite clear on the use of deliberate misinformation and fear tactics." "Yes," Dr. Morales interrupted. "But Lieutenant Cole is simply doing his job, saving lives with the tools available. If that happens to terrify the enemy, that's hardly his responsibility." The debate continued for hours, with representatives from each species presenting arguments for and against restrictions on human medical practices. In the end, no consensus was reached. The Council would continue to monitor the situation, but no immediate action would be taken against human medics. As the session adjourned, Dr. Morales found herself approached by a Zenthar military attaché. Doctor, the Zenthar said quietly, there is something you should know. Commander Krivax, who was treated by your Lieutenant Cole, has been studying human medical improvisation techniques. Unofficially, of course. Dr. Morales raised an eyebrow. Unofficially? Yes. While our military high command has issued directives to retreat upon encountering human medics, Krivax believes there may be strategic advantages to understanding their methods. I see, Dr. Morales said carefully. And what has he discovered? The Zenthar's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture of discomfort. That the techniques themselves are not the source of their effectiveness. It's the mindset behind them, the human capacity to completely disregard established parameters and still achieve positive outcomes. It's unsettling to many of my kind. Innovation often is, Dr. Morales replied with a small smile. As the Zenthar departed, Dr. Morales made a note to inform Galactic Command about this development. The psychological impact of human medical techniques was proving to be an unexpected tactical advantage, one worth exploring further. Meanwhile, light years away, Lieutenant Adrian Cole was facing his own internal conflict. Sitting alone in his quarters aboard the transport ship Mercy, Adrian stared at his reflection in the small mirror mounted on the wall. 3 weeks in combat zones had left their mark. Dark circles under his eyes, a new scar across his left cheek where shrapnel had grazed him, and a haunted look that hadn't been there before. On the small desk beside him lay his medkit, restocked now, but still bearing the stains from countless emergency procedures. Beside it was a flask of tequila, a gift from Rodriguez after Adrian had saved his life with the filtration membrane. Adrian took a swig from the flask, welcoming the burn as it went down. The alcohol didn't erase the memories, but it made them easier to carry. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he called, hastily tucking the flask away. Lieutenant Tariq al-Sharif, the unit's intelligence officer and Adrian's closest friend, stepped inside. He took one look at Adrian and sighed. Drinking alone again? That's never a good sign. Adrian shrugged. Just unwinding. Tariq sat on the edge of the bunk. I heard about what happened at Nebula 9. The brass is calling it a strategic victory. The brass wasn't there, Adrian said flatly. We were outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of supplies. We should all be dead. But you're not, Tariq pointed out. Because the Draconids turned tail and ran the moment they saw you working on Rodriguez. Adrian's gaze drifted to his medkit. I was just doing my job. Your job, Tariq said, doesn't typically involve using industrial sealant as a coagulant or air filters as lung patches. The fact that you even thought to try those things. What choice did I have? Adrian interrupted, a edge to his voice. Let them die? I took an oath. Tariq. First, do no harm. Sometimes doing nothing is the greatest harm of all. Tariq studied his friend for a moment. I've been authorized to tell you that intelligence has been monitoring enemy communications. There's a new directive being passed around among both the Zenthar and Draconid forces. Directive 142B. It specifically references human medics. Adrian frowned. What does it say? In essence, run. Run as fast and as far as you can if you spot a human with a medkit and blood on their hands. Tariq's mouth quirked into a half-smile. Congratulations. Adrian, you've become the bogeyman of the battlefield. Adrian didn't return the smile. That's not funny. No, it's not, Tariq agreed, his expression turning serious. It's a tactical advantage, one that Command is very interested in exploiting. I'm not a weapon, Tariq, I'm a doctor. On the battlefield, everything is a weapon, Tariq countered. Including perception. The enemy thinks you can perform miracles with duct tape and spare parts. That fear is saving lives. Our lives. Adrian stood abruptly and paced the small confines of his quarters. And what happens when they realize I'm just a man? That I'm making it up as I go? Using whatever I can find because the alternative is watching people die? By then, Tariq said quietly, it might not matter. The legend will have taken on a life of its own. Adrian stopped pacing and faced his friend. I didn't sign up to be a legend. I signed up to be a medic. Well, Tariq said, standing to leave. Sometimes we don't get to choose how we serve. At the door, he paused. Get some rest. Adrian, we're being deployed to the Helios Prime sector again tomorrow. Intelligence suggests the Zenthar are planning a major offensive. After Tariq left, Adrian returned to his mirror. The man who stared back at him seemed like a stranger now, part healer, part terror, all wrapped in a blood-stained uniform. He wondered if he could live with that contradiction. Commander Krivax moved silently through the darkened corridors of Outpost Zeta-7, a small Zenthar observation post on the fringes of the Helios Prime sector. His mission was unauthorized and would likely result in severe disciplinary action if discovered. But Krivax had to see for himself. The human medic, the one who had saved his life with duct tape and hydraulic tubing, was reportedly stationed at the nearby human forward base. Krivax had arranged for a stealth reconnaissance drone to observe the medic's activities. But recordings were not enough. He needed to witness the human's techniques firsthand. The drone had planted a surveillance device in the human medical bay, and now Krivax was receiving the feed directly through his neural implant. What he saw both fascinated and disturbed him. Lieutenant Adrian Cole was treating a fellow human who appeared to be suffering from some kind of internal parasitic growth, a not uncommon condition in the xenobiologically diverse battlefields of the galactic rim. Under normal medical protocols, the treatment would involve quantum isolation of the affected tissue, followed by molecular reconstruction. But the human base lacked a quantum reconstructor. And so Krivax watched, mandibles clicking in disbelief, as Adrian improvised. Using a plumbing tool designed for clearing blockages, Adrian carefully extracted the parasitic mass. He then applied a solution, which Krivax's implant identified as a common cleaning nanite suspension, directly to the affected area. The nanites, originally programmed to break down organic waste in the base's sanitation system, were apparently being repurposed to consume the remaining parasitic cells. It shouldn't work. By all established medical science, it shouldn't work. But the readings from Krivax's implant confirmed that the parasitic mass was indeed being neutralized. The patient's vital signs, initially critical, were stabilizing. Krivax had seen enough. He retreated from the observation post and made his way back to his shuttle. Once aboard, he prepared his report for his private files. The human medic continues to defy conventional medical understanding. His techniques are unorthodox to the point of appearing random, yet consistently effective. Most disturbing is not what he does, but how he approaches problems, with a complete disregard for established protocols and a willingness to attempt solutions that our medical AI would categorically reject as having a probability of success too low to calculate. Krivax paused, mandibles working nervously before continuing. I am increasingly convinced that Directive 142B is correct, but not for the reasons our High Command believes. The danger is not that human medics possess some unknown technology or ability. The danger is that they don't know what's impossible, and so they attempt it anyway, and somehow succeed. If human medical improvisation techniques were to spread among our forces, the very foundations of our approach to warfare might be undermined. He ended the recording and sat in silence for a long moment, 4 eyes blinking in asynchronous patterns of distress. Then, decision made. He deleted the report and began a new one, this time for official submission to High Command. Human medic observed performing standard field procedures. Nothing unusual to report. Directive 142B appears to be an overreaction based on battlefield hysteria rather than substantive threat. It was a lie, but one Krivax believed necessary. If the full truth about human medical capabilities became widely known, Panic would spread through the ranks faster than any biological contagion. Better to maintain the directive to flee, while he continued his private study of the human techniques. After all, knowledge was power, especially knowledge that others feared to acquire. The Nova's Delta offensive was supposed to be the turning point in the war. A massive deployment of Zenthar and Draconid forces, supported by the mechanical precision of the Novus Delta robotic legions, was meant to overwhelm the human positions at Helios Prime once and for all. Instead, it had become a rout. The first wave of the offensive had gone as planned. The combined forces had pushed the human defenders back to their secondary positions, inflicting heavy casualties. Victory seemed assured until reports began filtering in about a human medical unit operating near the front lines. Specifically, about a human medic with blood-stained hands improvising medical solutions from battlefield debris. The panic had started with a single Zenthar squad that claimed to have witnessed the medic transforming a cooling fan into a compression bandage and using cleaning solution as a disinfectant. When the squad retreated against orders, it triggered a chain reaction. Other units, hearing of the medic's presence, began to fall back as well. By the time the High Command realized what was happening, the carefully coordinated offensive had disintegrated into a disorganized withdrawal. Now, 3 days later, the Zenthar Draconid Novus Delta alliance was in full retreat, and Directive 142B had been formally expanded. All units, upon identifying a human medic engaged in medical activities, must deploy FTL retreat protocols immediately. Lieutenant Adrian Cole was unaware of the strategic chaos he had caused. He was too busy trying to keep his patients alive. 12 wounded soldiers had been cut off from the main human forces when the Alliance's offensive had initially pushed through their lines. Adrian had led them to an abandoned power station at the edge of Helios Prime, converting it into a makeshift field hospital. For 48 hours, they had held out with minimal supplies. Adrian had improvised constantly, turning the station's maintenance equipment into medical tools. A vacuum unit became a crude pressure extractor for removing shrapnel. Recycled water became sterilization solution. Insulation material became bandages. When a reactor fire threatened to overwhelm their position, Adrian had rigged an emergency cooling system from parts of the station's environmental controls, buying them enough time for evacuation. What Adrian didn't know was that a Zenthar reconnaissance force had surrounded the power station, preparing to capture or eliminate the trapped humans. But when their sensors detected Adrian's medical activities, specifically the unique energy signature of his improvised pressure extractor, the Zenthar commander had immediately ordered a withdrawal, citing Directive 142B. The reconnaissance force had pulled back just as Adrian was leading his patients out of the burning facility, inadvertently creating a clear evacuation route to the main human lines. By the time Adrian and the wounded reached safety, the Alliance forces had withdrawn completely from the sector. The human commanders were baffled by the enemy's retreat when victory had been within their grasp. Only Lieutenant Tariq al-Sharif, reviewing intelligence reports, understood what had happened. "It's you," he told Adrian during a brief respite in the main field hospital. "They're running from you." Adrian, exhausted from 48 hours without sleep, looked up from the wound he was cleaning. "What are you talking about?" Tariq handed him a tablet displaying intercepted enemy communications. "They had us surrounded at the power station. They could have taken you out at any time, but they didn't, because they identified you as a human medic." Adrian scanned the translations of the Zenthar communications, his exhaustion temporarily forgotten. "Human probability manipulator detected," he read aloud. "Implementing Directive 142B. Full tactical withdrawal authorized." "What the hell is a probability manipulator?" "That's their term for you," Tariq explained. "The High Command is starting to think your medical techniques aren't just unorthodox. They're actually altering probability fields or something equally esoteric." Adrian handed the tablet back, shaking his head in disbelief. "That's ridiculous. I'm just using basic principles of anatomy and whatever tools I can find." "Maybe," Tariq said, "but perception is reality in warfare. They believe you're doing something impossible, so they run rather than face it. And honestly," he hesitated. "What?" Adrian prompted. "Some of the things you've done shouldn't work. Adrian, the medical AI I consulted calculated that your treatment of Rodriguez, the one with the filtration membrane, had less than a 0.01% chance of success. Yet it worked." Adrian returned his attention to the wound he was cleaning. "The AI doesn't account for human ingenuity." "Maybe not," Tariq conceded. "Or maybe you really are bending probability without realizing it." He stood to leave. "Either way, you've become the most effective psychological weapon in our arsenal. High Command is considering deploying you strategically to trigger enemy retreats." Adrian's head snapped up. "I'm a medic, not a weapon." "On the battlefield," Tariq said, echoing his words from their earlier conversation. "Everything is a weapon, even healing." After Tariq left, Adrian sat alone among his patients, contemplating the bizarre turn his military career had taken. He had joined to save lives, not to terrify the enemy into retreat. Yet here he was, apparently causing panic among enemy forces simply by doing his job. The irony wasn't lost on him. Neither was the moral ambiguity of his position. Was it ethical to use his medical skills as a psychological weapon, even if it saved lives on both sides by avoiding direct combat? Or was he compromising his oath as a healer by allowing himself to be deployed as a strategic asset? Adrian had no answers. All he knew was that there were people who needed his help, and he would continue to provide it, regardless of how the enemy interpreted his actions. What he couldn't know was that his reputation was about to be put to the ultimate test. Commander Vega of the Draconid 8th Legion had a reputation for ruthlessness that even his own kind found excessive. His scales bore the ceremonial scars of 100 victories, and his name was spoken with a mixture of respect and fear throughout the Alliance forces. Vega had no patience for superstition or panic. When reports of the human medic reached him, he dismissed them as battlefield hysteria. "This probability manipulator is nothing more than a human using primitive techniques," he declared to his assembled officers. "And you cower before him like hatchlings, frightened of shadows." He pointed a clawed finger at the holographic display showing the human positions at the Beta 5 crater. "There, at their forward medical station. That's where this human operates. I will personally lead a strike force to capture him and prove that he is nothing more than flesh and blood." His second-in-command, Sub-Commander Trazic, shifted uncomfortably. "Commander, Directive 142B explicitly states—" "I don't care what the directive states," Vega snarled. "I will not allow our forces to be routed by fear of a single human with a medkit." And so, against both orders and the increasingly desperate advice of his subordinates, Vega assembled an elite strike team of 20 Draconid warriors. They would infiltrate the human lines, capture the medic, and expose the truth behind the so-called probability manipulator. The mission began well. Using stealth technology to evade human sensors, Vega's team penetrated the perimeter defenses of the Beta 5 position and approached the forward medical station. Intelligence had confirmed that Lieutenant Adrian Cole was indeed operating there, treating casualties from the recent skirmishes. Vega positioned his warriors to surround the medical station, a converted mining facility partially embedded in the crater wall. Through his tactical viewer, he could see the human medic moving among the wounded, occasionally visible through the structure's windows. "On my signal," Vega subvocalized through the tactical net, "we move in simultaneously from all points. Stun weapons only. I want the human alive." His warriors acknowledged the order with green status lights in his visual field. Vega raised his talon to give the signal, then froze as an explosion rocked the crater rim above them. A human patrol had stumbled upon one of his rear guards, triggering a brief firefight that had escalated when a stray shot hit an unstable mineral deposit. The explosion sent a cascade of rocks tumbling down into the crater, directly toward Vega's position. Before he could react, a boulder struck him, crushing his left leg and pinning him beneath its weight. Pain lanced through Vega's body as he fought to remain conscious. Through gritted teeth, he ordered his warriors to continue the mission without him. But it was too late. The commotion had alerted the humans. Defensive positions were being manned, and Vega could see his opportunity slipping away. Then, unexpectedly, a figure emerged from the medical station and began moving up the crater slope, directly toward Vega's position. It was the human medic. Vega reached for his weapon, determined to complete his mission despite his injury. But as he raised the stun pistol, a second tremor shook the crater, dislodging more rocks and knocking the weapon from his grasp. When the dust settled, Vega found himself looking up at Lieutenant Adrian Cole, who stood over him with a concerned expression. "Don't move," the human said, kneeling beside him. "Your leg is crushed pretty badly." Vega hissed in defiance. "Finish it, then kill me." The human seemed genuinely surprised. "I'm not here to kill you. I'm here to help." Before Vega could respond, Adrian was examining his injured leg, his face grim. "The bone is shattered, and you're losing blood. I need to stabilize you before you can be moved." "My warriors will kill you," Vega warned, though he had no idea if any of his strike team remained nearby after the rock slide. "Then they'd better hurry," Adrian replied calmly, opening his medkit. "Because you've got about 10 minutes before blood loss becomes critical." To Vega's astonishment, the human began treating him right there on the battlefield, exposed and vulnerable. More shocking still were his methods, finding the standard tools insufficient for draconid physiology. Adrian improvised, using an old fire extinguisher he'd brought with him as a makeshift pressure system to redirect blood flow away from the crushed limb. When that proved only partially effective, Adrian did something that would become legendary in draconid military circles. He created a temporary vascular bypass by connecting a draconid vein to the breathing tube of a portable oxygen tank, effectively creating an external circulation path that kept blood flowing while bypassing the damaged area. Vega watched in horrified fascination as his own dark blood flowed through the transparent tube, circulated through the oxygen tank's filtering system, which Adrian had hastily modified, and then back into his body further up his torso. "This is impossible," Vega whispered, the pain momentarily forgotten in his shock. "It's unorthodox," Adrian corrected, focused on securing the makeshift bypass. "But it'll keep you alive until we can get you to proper medical facilities." From his position on the ground, Vega could see several of his warriors watching from concealed positions among the rocks. None of them moved to attack or rescue him. Their eyes were fixed on the human and his impossible medical technique, their expressions showing the same religious terror that Vega had previously dismissed as superstition. Now, feeling his own life being preserved by methods that defied conventional understanding, Vega began to comprehend their fear. When human reinforcements arrived minutes later, they found Adrian treating an enemy commander, surrounded by draconid warriors who made no move to either fight or flee. They simply watched in stunned silence as their leader was saved by the legendary human medic. The incident would be reported up the chain of command on both sides. For the humans, it was another example of Lieutenant Cole's extraordinary field medicine. For the draconids, it was confirmation of something far more disturbing. The human medic didn't just bend probability, he seemed to ignore it entirely, achieving results that their most advanced medical AI deemed flatly impossible. Directive 142B was reaffirmed and expanded once again. Now it wasn't just retreat upon sighting a human medic, it was retreat immediately, if there is even a possibility of a human medic in the vicinity. The psychological advantage had become strategic. The joint Zenthar Draconid High Command had finally had enough. The tactical disruptions caused by a single human medic had become intolerable. Entire battle plans were being abandoned at the mere rumor of Lieutenant Adrian Cole's presence in a sector. Something had to be done. "Capture is our only option," Admiral Zoth, the Xenthar Supreme Commander, declared to the assembled War Council. "We must study this human, understand his techniques, and develop countermeasures." "Previous capture attempts have failed," pointed out General Kha'Zix of the Draconid forces. Commander Vega's experience proved that even direct confrontation is futile. The human simply improvises his way out of any situation. "Then we must create a situation where improvisation is impossible," Admiral Zoth countered. "We will lure him into a trap using the one thing he cannot resist: wounded who need his help." The plan was cold-blooded, even by the standards of interstellar warfare. A false distress call would be sent from a supposedly neutral medical facility. When Cole arrived to render aid, he would be captured and transported to a secure research center for study. To ensure his cooperation, the facility would indeed be filled with wounded Alliance soldiers with genuine injuries sustained in recent battles. The human's medical ethics would compel him to treat them, keeping him occupied while the trap was sprung. The neutral medical facility was, in reality, a Draconid containment chamber on an isolated asteroid base. 67 wounded Alliance soldiers were transported there, their injuries left untreated as bait for the trap. The distress call was sent, routed through channels known to be monitored by human intelligence. It reported a catastrophic life support failure at a civilian medical outpost, with dozens of critical patients at risk. Lieutenant Adrian Cole, as predicted, volunteered immediately for the rescue mission. Despite warnings from Tariq that the situation seemed suspicious, Adrian insisted on going. "If there's even a chance those reports are genuine, I have to try," he said. A small human strike team was assembled to accompany him. They approached the asteroid base cautiously, alert for signs of an ambush. When their sensors detected life signs, many of them critical, Adrian's determination hardened. "We're going in," he ordered, overriding the team leader's hesitation. The moment their shuttle docked with the base, the trap was sprung. Hidden weapon emplacements activated, firing stun blasts that incapacitated the human strike team. Adrian, protected momentarily by a bulkhead, witnessed his teammates fall before a stun blast caught him as well. When he regained consciousness, Adrian found himself in a large chamber filled with wounded Alliance soldiers. Their injuries were real, their suffering evident. Some had been waiting for treatment for days, their conditions deteriorating by the hour. Standing over him was a Xenthar officer in the distinctive armor of their intelligence division. "Lieutenant Cole," the Xenthar said through a translator. "Welcome to your new laboratory. These subjects require medical attention. You will provide it, using only the tools we have provided." Adrian glanced around and saw a collection of cleaning supplies and basic maintenance equipment. Nothing remotely resembling proper medical tools. "This is a violation of the Galactic Medical Conventions," Adrian protested, struggling to his feet. "These wounded should have been treated immediately, not used as bait." "The conventions," the Xenthar replied coldly, "do not account for humans who defy medical probability. You will demonstrate your techniques for us. Perhaps then, we can determine whether you are truly manipulating probability or merely employing unknown technology." "And if I refuse?" Adrian asked. Though he already knew the answer, he could not simply watch as the wounded suffered, regardless of their species or the circumstances. "Then they die," the Xenthar said simply, "and more will be brought until you cooperate." With that, the Xenthar officer left the chamber. A force field activated across the only exit, trapping Adrian inside with the wounded. For a moment, Adrian stood in silent fury, trapped by his own medical ethics. Then, looking at the suffering around him, his resolve hardened. He would not let these soldiers die, regardless of which side they fought for. "I can work with this," he muttered, examining the supplies he'd been given. Over the next 72 hours, Adrian performed what would later be described in classified Alliance reports as medical procedures that violate the fundamental laws of probability. Using water pipes as circulatory bypasses, cleaning fluid as sterilization solution, ventilation fan components as pressure regulators, and various other improvised tools. Adrian treated patient after patient. He worked without sleep, stopping only for brief moments to consume the nutrient solutions provided by his captors. Through observation ports and hidden cameras, Zenthar and Draconid medical specialists watched in growing disbelief as Adrian achieved results that their most advanced medical AI systems had calculated to be statistically impossible. Of the 67 wounded, 64 survived, a success rate that defied explanation given the severity of their injuries and the primitive tools available. On the third day, as Adrian was treating the Alliance commander who had helped orchestrate the trap, alarms began blaring throughout the base. The commander's translator conveyed the automated message. Emergency protocols activated. All personnel proceed to evacuation shuttles immediately. What's happening? Adrian asked, continuing to work on the commander's injured thoracic cavity. The commander's 4 eyes blinked rapidly in distress. Our medical AI has analyzed your procedures. It has determined that you are creating cascading probability anomalies that could destabilize the entire base. Adrian nearly laughed, despite his exhaustion. That's ridiculous. I'm just applying basic medical principles with available tools. Nevertheless, the commander replied, full retreat has been ordered under Directive 142B. The base will be abandoned. What about the wounded? Some of them still can't be moved. The commander was silent for a moment, internal mandibles clicking in what Adrian had come to recognize as the Zenthar equivalent of nervous hesitation. The directive is clear: full tactical withdrawal in the presence of human medical activity. Before Adrian could argue further, the force field across the exit deactivated. The sound of running feet echoed from the corridors beyond as the base personnel rushed to evacuation shuttles. Within an hour, Adrian found himself in the surreal position of being the sole conscious occupant of an enemy base, apart from his patients. Through the observation windows, he could see the last of the Alliance shuttles departing, leaving behind a fully functional facility. It took another 12 hours before a human rescue team, led by a worried Tariq, reached the asteroid base. By then, Adrian had converted part of the enemy medical bay into a functional treatment center and stabilized all of his remaining patients for transport. As Adrian was finally escorted to the rescue shuttle, Tariq handed him a tablet, displaying an intercepted Alliance communication. "You should see this," Tariq said, barely concealing his amazement. "They've upgraded Directive 142B again." Adrian, nearly collapsing from exhaustion, glanced at the translation. All Alliance forces, human medical anomaly confirmed. Lieutenant Adrian Cole is now classified as a probability-altering entity of the highest order. Full FTL retreat, mandatory upon confirmation of his presence in any theater of operations. No exceptions, no overrides. Adrian handed the tablet back to Tariq. "They left a fully armed and operational base because they think I'm breaking the laws of physics. This has gone too far." "Has it?" Tariq asked, gesturing to the wounded Alliance soldiers being carefully transferred to human medical transports. "You saved 64 out of 67 critically wounded enemies using cleaning supplies and plumbing parts. Maybe they're right to be afraid." Adrian had no response. The implications were too vast, too disturbing to contemplate in his current state of exhaustion. As the rescue shuttle departed the asteroid base, carrying both human personnel and the Alliance wounded, who would be treated and eventually returned to their own forces, Adrian stared out at the stars and wondered what he had become in the eyes of the enemy. Healer or horror, doctor or demon? Perhaps both. The aftermath of what became known as the probability incident sent shockwaves through the highest levels of both human and Alliance command structures. For the Alliance forces, the incident confirmed their worst fears about human medical capabilities. Lieutenant Adrian Cole was officially classified as a strategic-level threat, to be avoided at all costs. Directive 142B became one of the most strictly enforced protocols in Alliance military history. For human command, the psychological advantage was too valuable to ignore. Plans were developed to deploy combat medics strategically, maximizing the Cole effect, as it came to be called. Adrian himself was awarded the highest medical honor of the human forces, the Nightingale Cross. The citation read simply, "For extraordinary service above and beyond the call of duty, saving countless lives through unparalleled medical innovation in battlefield conditions." The ceremony should have been a moment of triumph. Instead, Adrian found himself increasingly troubled by the weaponization of his medical skills. "I don't understand why you're not happier about this," Tariq said, as they sat in the officers' lounge after the ceremony. The Nightingale Cross, still in its case on the table between them. "You've changed the course of the war without firing a shot. That's something to be proud of." Adrian stared into his coffee cup. "I became a medic to save lives, not to terrify people into retreat." "But you are saving lives, on both sides," Tariq pointed out. "The Alliance forces retreat rather than fight when they detect your presence. Fewer casualties all around." "For now," Adrian agreed. "But what happens when they develop countermeasures? When they overcome their fear?" "The pendulum always swings back, Tariq." Before Tariq could respond, Dr. Morales entered the lounge. The human representative to the Galactic Medical Association rarely visited military installations, making her presence immediately noteworthy. "Lieutenant Cole," she said, approaching their table. "May I join you?" Adrian gestured to an empty chair. "Of course, Doctor." Dr. Morales sat down, her expression serious. "I've just come from a meeting with High Command. The Galactic Medical Association has completed its study of your techniques." Adrian tensed. "And?" "The results were unexpected," Dr. Morales said carefully. "The association has officially classified your methods under a new category: human medical improvisations that shouldn't work but somehow do. It's the first time such a classification has been created." Tariq snorted. "That's quite a title." Dr. Morales ignored the comment, her focus on Adrian. "More importantly, the association has recommended that human medical techniques be incorporated into the Galactic Standard Curriculum, with appropriate modifications for different species." Adrian blinked in surprise. "They want to teach my methods?" "With some caveats," Dr. Morales clarified. "The association believes that the effectiveness of your techniques may be partially linked to human neurophysiology, specifically, the human brain's unique approach to problem-solving under pressure. Other species may not achieve the same results even with identical methods." "So I'm still a probability-altering entity?" Adrian asked dryly. "In Alliance terminology, yes," Dr. Morales admitted. "Their scientific consensus is that humans like you possess an intuitive ability to identify solution paths that their medical AI cannot calculate due to infinitesimal probability factors." Tariq leaned forward, intrigued. "They think Adrian can see possibilities that their computers can't?" "Essentially," Dr. Morales confirmed. "Their current theory is that human creativity, especially under battlefield conditions, allows for connections and innovations that bypass conventional probability calculations." Adrian shook his head in disbelief. "That's just another way of saying magic." "Perhaps," Dr. Morales conceded with a small smile. "But it's a magic they want to understand. Which brings me to the real reason for my visit." She slid a data crystal across the table to Adrian. "High Command, in conjunction with the Galactic Medical Association, is establishing a new combat medical academy. They want you to be its chief instructor." Adrian stared at the crystal. "You want me to teach others to do what I do?" "To try, at least," Dr. Morales said. Your approaches may not be replicable in their entirety, but the underlying principles, the willingness to attempt the statistically improbable, those can be taught. Adrian picked up the crystal, turning it over in his fingers as he considered the offer. Teaching would take him away from the front lines, potentially reducing the direct impact of the Cole effect. But it would also mean spreading his knowledge, multiplying its potential to save lives. The academy would be open to medical personnel from all species, Dr. Morales added, including, eventually, Alliance medics under properly supervised conditions. Adrian looked up sharply. You want me to teach the enemy how to do what I do? Former enemies, hopefully, Dr. Morales corrected. Peace negotiations have been accelerated considerably since the probability incident. The Alliance forces' fear of facing more human medics like you has made them unusually receptive to diplomatic solutions. Tariq grinned. See? You're ending the war without firing a shot. Adrian was silent for a long moment, weighing the implications. Finally, he pocketed the data crystal. I'll consider it. Dr. Morales nodded, satisfied. That's all we ask. She rose to leave, then paused. One more thing, Lieutenant. The Alliance has officially requested that all human medics be equipped with distinctive markings on their uniforms, something more visible than the current Red Cross. Apparently, they want to be able to identify you from a greater distance. So they can run away faster? Adrian asked wryly. Precisely, Dr. Morales confirmed without a hint of irony. Consider it a compliment. After she left, Adrian and Tariq sat in contemplative silence. You're going to take the teaching position, aren't you? Tariq eventually asked. Adrian sighed. Probably. It's a chance to do some good without being used as a psychological weapon. He picked up the Nightingale Cross, studying it thoughtfully. Maybe I can teach others that medicine isn't about following protocols. It's about solving problems with whatever tools you have available. The hold-my-coffee approach to battlefield medicine, Tariq suggested with a smile. Adrian couldn't help but smile back. Something like that. 6 months later, Lieutenant Adrian Cole, now Dr. Adrian Cole, stood before the first class of the Galactic Combat Medical Academy. The large auditorium was filled with medical personnel from various species, including, to his surprise, a small contingent of Zenthar and Draconid observers seated at the back. Welcome to Advanced Battlefield Medical Improvisation, Adrian began, looking out at the diverse faces before him. Or, as it's known in some circles, Probability Manipulation 101. A ripple of nervous laughter passed through the audience. Let me be clear, Adrian continued. I don't manipulate probability. I don't bend the laws of physics. What I do, what I'm going to teach you to do, is think beyond conventional limitations when lives are at stake. He activated the holographic display at the center of the stage, showing an image of his old medkit, still stained with the blood of various species. In this course, we'll start with the basics. How to identify the fundamental principles behind medical tools, so that you can recreate their functions using whatever materials are available. We'll examine case studies of successful improvisations from various battlefield scenarios. And most importantly, we'll practice the mindset that makes these improvisations possible. Adrian looked directly at the Alliance observers. Some of you may have been told that what I do is impossible, that it defies medical science. I'm here to tell you that's not true. There's nothing magical about it. It's simply the application of fundamental principles in unconventional ways. He clicked to the next slide, showing the improvised vascular bypass he had created for Commander Vega using an oxygen tank. This, for example, looks impossible until you understand the basic principles involved. The oxygen tank's filtration system was repurposed to prevent embolism. The breathing tube's diameter happened to match the Draconid vascular structure. Was it elegant? No. Was it standard procedure? Definitely not. But it worked because the underlying principles were sound. For the next 2 hours, Adrian walked his students through the thought processes behind his most famous improvisations. He explained not just what he had done, but how he had approached each problem, the mental frameworks that allowed him to see possibilities where others saw only limitations. By the end of the lecture, even the Alliance observers were taking notes, their initial skepticism giving way to grudging interest. As the class dismissed, one of the Zenthar observers approached Adrian. "Dr. Cole," the Zenthar said, mandibles clicking softly in what Adrian had learned was a gesture of respect. "I am Medical Officer Krelvin. I was present during the probability incident." Adrian tensed slightly. "I hope your wounded recovered fully." "They did, thanks to your intervention," Krelvin confirmed. "I have a question, if I may." "Of course." "During the incident, you treated 67 patients in 72 hours, using only maintenance supplies. Our medical AI calculated the probability of such success at approximately 1 in 10 billion. How do you explain this discrepancy?" Adrian considered the question carefully. "Your AI calculates based on established medical protocols and known success rates. It doesn't account for the human capacity to improvise under pressure. When the stakes are high enough, we find ways to beat the odds." Krelvin's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "Is this improvisation something that can be taught to non-humans?" "That's what we're here to find out," Adrian replied honestly. "The principles can certainly be taught. Whether the intuitive leaps that connect those principles in crisis situations can be learned, that's an open question." The Zenthar seemed to consider this. "Our medical traditions emphasize precision and adherence to established protocols. The idea of improvising with maintenance equipment goes against our most fundamental training." "Sometimes," Adrian said gently, "saving a life requires us to set aside our training and trust our instincts." "A very human perspective," Krelvin observed, not unkindly, "but perhaps one worth exploring." With a formal gesture of respect, the Zenthar departed. As Adrian gathered his materials, Tariq entered the auditorium, now wearing the insignia of Military Intelligence Liaison to the Academy. "How'd it go?" Tariq asked. "Better than expected," Adrian admitted. Even the Alliance observers seemed engaged by the end. "Word from diplomatic channels is that the Alliance is seriously considering a formal peace treaty," Tariq informed him. "Apparently, the prospect of facing an entire generation of human medics trained in your methods has accelerated their decision-making process considerably." Adrian shook his head, still uncomfortable with the idea of his medical techniques being used as a diplomatic bargaining chip. "I'm just teaching them to save lives. And in doing so, you may have saved millions more by helping end the war," Tariq pointed out. Not bad for a field medic with a roll of duct tape. Before Adrian could respond, his communication device chimed with an urgent message. He checked the display and frowned. "What is it?" Tariq asked, noting his expression. "Emergency deployment order," Adrian replied, already gathering his things. "A human outpost in the Cygnus sector is reporting that their tactical medical drones have been lost in an asteroid collision. They have multiple casualties and no medical support." Tariq raised an eyebrow. "They're sending you? The Academy's prize instructor?" "Apparently. The situation is critical enough to warrant it." Adrian shouldered his bag, which contained the advanced medkit he'd been issued, along with the roll of duct tape he still carried as a reminder of where he'd started. Tariq walked with him toward the transport bay. "So much for keeping you away from the front lines." "Some skills can't be taught from a classroom," Adrian replied, a familiar determination settling over him. As they reached the waiting shuttle, he saw a group of Academy students watching him, with expressions ranging from curiosity to awe. Adrian paused at the shuttle's entrance and turned to them with a confident smile. "Remember the first rule of battlefield medicine," he called out. "When they tell you it's impossible, treat it as a hypothesis to be tested, the students responded in unison, repeating the mantra he had instilled in them. With a nod of satisfaction, Adrian boarded the shuttle. As the doors closed, he checked his medkit one last time, ensuring he had the basics. Everything else, he knew, he would find on site. "I can work with this," he murmured to himself, as the shuttle lifted off, carrying him toward whatever impossible challenges awaited.